Hello, and welcome to the second episode in the second season of Toward a More Just Future, a podcast from Rutgers School of Social Work. My name is Marla Blunt-Carter, and I'm an assistant professor of professional practice at Rutgers School of Social Work. Last season, I spoke with voices in politics to understand what change is, how it unfolds, and how more people can get involved. Our guests showed that change can and should happen at the micro, meso, and macro levels. Creating change at any level can be difficult, but it can be done by anyone. This season, on our podcast, I'm speaking with another group of inspiring individuals who are working on the ground to make progress toward justice and equality. We hope you find these conversations useful, whether you're a social work student, a practitioner, or anyone who's interested in learning about how to make a difference. Today, I'll be speaking with Nicole Epps, Executive Director of the World Childhood Foundation USA. Epps has been a nonprofit leader in the anti-trafficking and street-affected vulnerable youth population, both domestically and internationally. Nicole received her MSW with a certificate in promoting child and adolescent well-being at Rutgers School of Social Work, so she could expand her knowledge of programming and clinical work with adolescents, and to develop solutions to end child sexual abuse and exploitation on and offline. Nicole is also the president-elect of the National Coalition to Prevent Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation. She has been appointed to the New Jersey Task Force on Child Abuse and Neglect and chairs the Outreach and Engagement Committee. She is a member of APSAC's Public Policy Committee and a member of RAIN's National Leadership Council. In addition, Nicole is a member of the University of Pennsylvania's James Brister Society and serves in an advisory role for Stop It Now, Gallup NYC, and Vision and Pathways. Prior to receiving her MSW from Rutgers, Nicole graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and earned her BA in Political Science and International Relations. She received her MBA in Management and Marketing from the University of Georgia's Terry School of Business. She also studied international law, economics, and organization at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Hi, Nicole, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. Well, let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself, or tell us a lot. Just tell us who Nicole Epps is.
Sure. So I am a Brooklyn-born native, one of the few, and I am the daughter of a military man and a Trinidadian woman, and I'm currently the executive director of the World Childhood Foundation USA, or Childhood USA, which is one of 4 international offices founded by Her Majesty Queen Sylvia of Sweden to help support and develop solutions to end child sexual abuse and exploitation around the globe. I actually began my career in finance and transitioned for the past decade or so working with vulnerable adolescent populations and anti-trafficking in the US and internationally. So excited to be here.
Wow, that is a mouthful. And yeah. You spoke of finance. So how did you get to social work from finance?
Well, I think it's really interesting in general about how our life changes and how our plans may not often be the plans that we really want to live. So as I mentioned, I'm the daughter of first generation Trinidadian. And so in the West Indies, you know, when you come to the US, your children are expected to be either a banker, a doctor, a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And I have always been drawn to working in nonprofits, but I also thought that was something, you know, you did when you're when you're older or when you're sort of winding down your career. And so I embarked on a career in private investment management, and I hated absolutely every second of it. And then Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. Oh, wow. And I was one of the only people who was really smiling and excited about that. So that should probably be a sign that this is not the career for you. Right. And the idea of working in finance again just seemed horrific to me. Mm-hmm. So I really took the time off to volunteer with the Boys and Girls Club in Atlanta. And then I also watched a documentary called Girls Like Us, which was about trafficking in the United States with a focus specifically on sort of Black and brown bodies. And these girls that, you know, in the documentary were girls that looked like me, looked like my daughter, looked like my nieces. And I just couldn't believe that this was happening in the United States and happening in Atlanta and New York and all these places that I was a part of. And I think it was at that moment that I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. And there is no safe job. So why not just do what you love? And I've really dedicated my life since that moment in 2009 to hopefully creating a better world where all of our children are safe from abuse and exploitation.
Yeah, so it's been over a decade since you've been in this
It is,
work.
but we don't have to focus on that decade. But yes, absolutely.
Well, so in the course of the last 10 years, have you seen a difference in this issue?
Sure. I mean, I think 10 years ago, it was still a very taboo subject. And it was something that I think many people thought was, you know, this happens in other countries. That didn't happen here. And now it's a conversation that we have in all levels of our society. Our students are being trained in schools. Our teachers are trained to identify. Our police forces are being educated. I also think that there has been a radical transformation in what we view as a victim or a survivor of trafficking. It's not, you know, oftentimes when I have talks like these, I say, it's not Taken, you know, it's not Liam Neeson all the time. It's girls and boys who look like your children, who could be in school with your children. There are particular vulnerabilities, but for many children and youth who are trafficked, they think they're in a relationship, they think that they're in love, or they're running from something. So something is worse staying than being in the life. So I think that has been helpful and transformative. We've included more survivor voices in creating solutions, but there's so much work to be done. I think that we can see this in all levels of society that, you know, there are the cute victims, the victims that people feel sorry for. And then we have our boys and girls who may not be as cute, who may look older, who may be minorities, who may live in communities that people don't want to speak of. And so we need to put just as much attention, you know, again, bringing up Taken, to the Liam Neesons. We need to have just as much attention in Newark and Trenton as we do in, you know, a wonderful suburb in Virginia when they went to Paris for, you know, a senior trip. Right. So that's been there. But I think the one thing I would just add is, having spent over a decade working in trafficking, and that has been, again, my life's work, and it's been difficult. I think what was the most shocking to me is now that I've moved into working in the prevention of child sexual abuse, that's a much harder conversation. And I never thought that would be the hard conversation. But the reality is, for many people, trafficking remains, again, this thing that happens rarely. Yet we know here in the United States, by the time a child is 18 years old, about 1 in 6 girls and 1 in 10 boys will have a lived experience of abuse. Right. So I think that's really where we need to focus our attention and our energy, because if we can prevent abuse for our children, then hopefully we'll never even have to get into the prevention of trafficking, because we've kept them safe.
So true. So true. So how can our listeners or viewers assist you in this work? I know that you started in social work as a volunteer. And so I know that there are many people that want to make a difference, want to be a part of something positive. And I know, as an individual that has worked in nonprofit, volunteers, they are the boots on the ground.
Yeah, they are.
So how can we help you in this work?
You know, I think that we are nothing without our volunteers. They're our lifeblood. I'll say one in broad strokes and then specifically for world childhood. I think the first is having the conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Have the conversations with the children and the adults in your lives. When we were growing up, we learned a lot about stranger danger and the man in the van. The reality is that the danger is the people you have in your lives.
Right.
So keep your eyes wide open. When people say to me, Nicole, what are the things I need to do to keep children in my life safe? One, talk to your children. Let them know that your job is to protect them and to keep them safe. And keeping them safe means that you will believe them no matter what they say. I think oftentimes we minimize our children's voices and we say, oh, it wasn't like that. No, believe their emotions. Show respect as you're raising your child, that no matter if you don't feel comfortable, I'm going to ask you why, and I'm not going to make you do something that's uncomfortable. The second is keep your eyes wide open. There's no reason for an adult to be alone with a child. When you're in spaces where you feel something in your gut, trust your gut. It doesn't steer you wrong. Abuse is a crime of opportunity. So minimize those opportunities. At the World Childhood Foundation USA, one, we're always looking for volunteers. We always want people who can share on social media our helpful tips that we give out every Wednesday. Most importantly, we have a new initiative called the Care Coin that we're piloting in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. And these are coins that will be in area businesses and all places where children access the delis, daycare centers. And they're coins that a child can give to any adult in their lives that say they need to talk. And we know that it's so hard for children to disclose. So by giving that coin to an adult they trust, they're saying that they need to have a conversation. And then we've provided links on the back of the coin for adults for resources and referrals if there's crisis or if they need to know what questions to ask or where to get help. And we think that just having spaces where these coins are available are, one, it's going to change community behavior. But two, we need places where our kids can have resources. And it needs to be your library, your business, asking your school if they'll do that. And those, I think, are the helpful first steps for World Childhood Foundation, but also for our kids in general.
Yeah. When you spoke of the coin, I know recently there was a story in the news of a young girl that signed to someone that she was in danger, and she learned it from TikTok.
I love it.
I love it too. And so my next question is, are you able to communicate to all generations as it pertains to this issue? I think a lot of times we try to educate the parents, but I want to know, how are you educating the children? Because that young girl, learned that on TikTok. And so, are you in the schools? Are you?
So we have kind of a multi-pronged approach. So we are a foundation, and so we help support programs on the ground in addition to our community engagement. So what we like to do is have education on all levels. We actually believe that the prevention of child sexual abuse and exploitation is an adult responsibility. So often our focus is on the education of adults, but we also use our social media platforms because we don't know who else is there. It's funny that you mentioned TikTok, because we had a meeting yesterday saying that we need to be where our kids are, right? And so we do a lot on Instagram, but it looks like I'm going to have to start doing TikTok because that's where the kids are. But, the overarching message for us to our children is that it's never your fault. It's never your shame to hold. And, please find adults that are safe. But we think the real work and the real responsibility is for adults. And, people will say to us as an organization, how come you don't do as much? We do, community outreach, but not specific programs.
Right.
Beyond that not being our mandate, it's because I always give this analogy. The Me Too movement, which was actually started to discuss the lived experience of survivors of child sexual abuse, right? It has taken women, powerful women, 20 to 30 years to disclose.
Right.
And yet we ask a 5-year-old to disclose, to say no. That's a responsibility that comes with age and with time. And so really what we believe is children have the right to be children, which means they need the right to be free, to enjoy themselves. And we as adults, our job, the same way that we vaccinate our children, that might be controversial right now, the same way that we ask, we go to parent-teacher conference and we want to find out what's going on with our kids. We're asking questions about the safety of, the sports and who's the coach. that's the same responsibility we need to do for child sexual abuse. And we need to acknowledge that sometimes we let the monster in our home.
Yes.
We do. And we need to own that. And we also need to own sort of the multi-generational patterns where this abuse can continue or it can be minimized. Right. So we need to break those patterns. And when we do that, we have safer kids. So it's more of a holistic approach for us.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you did mention the role that you play, not in creating programs, but the macro impact.
Yes.
And so I guess this is where your MBA comes in handy. I want to hear from you. What is the value of the MSW in your work and the value of the MBA in your work?
Well, I'll start with the MBA and then I'll go to the MSW. I think the value of the MBA is that at the end of the day, as a nonprofit, we are a business. And we need to make sure that the majority of our spending is going to our programs and keeping our children safe. And so using my MBA, it's a lot of finance, it's a lot of Excel spreadsheets and pro formas, really making sure that we are balancing programmatic work with the administrative costs to absolutely do that. And then as an MSW, which I received from Rutgers University this August, which I'm so excited about. And it's, I stay second to my daughter. It's the thing I'm the most proud of. It informs all of my work. So I was a clinical social worker. Working in a foundation, oftentimes we've done so much on the macro level. We have worked with the economists in creating the Out of the Shadows Index, which is a benchmarking index of over 61 countries around the globe in their response to child sexual abuse and exploitation. We're now doing the US version of that index, identifying by region what that response is, but including sort of the online space. So one, that's the policy work, right? That's the policy side of our social work. What are the gaps? What are we missing? What can we do better? What are the unintended consequences of policy? But then using my clinical social work lens, at the end of the day, right? We as social workers have an obligation for the integrity of human relationships, that we are respectful, that there's a universal human right, no matter where you're born, about what you deserve. And that informs all of our work. The work we do in community engagement, it's not only lifting up our clients individually, it's lifting up our communities. It's the way that we treat our community elders with respect and knowing how to interact in communities and coming in humble and listening to what the needs are and not just kind of, I would say, sort of the older generation, if we go in the history of social work, where it was kind of, we're going to tell you how you're supposed to live. No, you're going to tell us how you live and how we can support you in that. And then at the end of the day, I had the honor at Convocation to speak. And I talked about the fact that we're the light. So we illuminate the darkness and we actually show what we can be the best in our society as individuals and as a whole. And that is what drives our work, to make that world, because I want a world that's safe for my daughter, for her friends, for the children that I know. And I want it just as safe, whether we're here in New Jersey, whether we're in New Mexico, or we're in India. It doesn't matter. I want every child to have the opportunity to grow up to be a healthy, emotionally healthy adult as well.
Nicole, let me ask you this. I'm sure that in most rooms where you are, you may be one of the only women of color.
Oh, yes.
Where do you find your safe space in a world where they're not used to seeing someone with an MBA and an MSW and beautiful melanin in their skin?
I think you're very gracious in saying one of. I walk into rooms and I am the only. Yeah. They have never seen anyone like me. At the end of the day, regardless of your degrees, and you know this, it doesn't matter. I am a Black woman in spaces where I'm not expected to be. And I can tell you countless times where people assume or put you in boxes of, you must be this, or you're a survivor. Not that there's anything wrong with being a survivor, but yeah, I am the only. And where is my safe space? To whom much is given, much is expected in return. Yes. So my safe space is, and this is not political, is I may be the first in the room, like Kamala Harris has said, but I want to ensure that when I leave, that there is more. And my safe space is looking at a world one day where I know at the end of the day, take away all the degrees, take away my job. My daughter is watching me. And I am the proud daughter, granddaughter, niece of strong Black women who've had it so much harder than me. So who am I, and how dare I think that my struggles are insurmountable? And so that's what drives me. It's the fact of who came before me, who even gave me the opportunity to study in these universities, and who will come after me. And then in terms of self-care and safe spaces, I think it's the importance of community. You need to form that community. You need to, I'm very blessed to have a great sister network of friends who are like family, where you can share those moments. There are some moments that being a woman of color, I'm sorry, nobody else is going to understand.
Yes.
Like there's a way that, whether you call it code switching, but it's just understanding. And and it gives me joy now, I would say after a decade, to now walk into some rooms and there are other women of color. And there's something that is just joyful when you see someone, because you're like, yeah, there's another one. We're here. And you know what? We're here and we're not going anywhere. And we're going to open up this table and we're going to make sure that, here at Childhood, we now have an obligation, and I have implemented, we will not support programs where the board is not reflective of the communities that they serve. We will not employ people for a position unless we have semifinals that include all diversity and all inclusion. And you know what? The reality of it is, whether you choose to believe the census or not, the world is changing, and we need to reflect that change.
Wow. So has it been challenging for you to challenge the organization that you're working for now to make those changes? Has it been a heavy lift? Is there resistance that you face? I
think that for the majority of people, my organization included, there is a desire to do the right thing. There may not be an understanding of how. And often, I work for an international organization, as I mentioned, and so it is Swedish in background. Sweden is a very progressive country. However, there are just tones and words that mean things in translation. So I would say that we have had tough conversations. I've been with the organization for 6 years. When I started, I was the only American in the organization. I was the only me in the organization. That is why I'm such a big proponent of diversity in the room, because you're hearing experiences that are not your own. There is nothing to be gained. I will be honest about this. If we all sit in a room with all women of color who have the same experience, we're not learning anything. So yes, we've had challenging conversations. Yes, we've pushed back sometimes, but I do feel thankful that I'm in an organization that is accepting of who I am and all of who I am, and that we're willing to do the work. And let me be clear, my passion is the ending of child sexual abuse and exploitation.
Yes.
If I do not feel that I will be respected and my views will be valued, I won't be in that organization.
Right.
Because life is too short and there's too much work to be done.
It's too short. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for the work that you do, because it's hard. And I can only imagine how lonely it is being in that position of leadership with no roadmap. You're called a trailblazer for a reason, because there was no trail, so I'm grateful for you for that. And I just feel just a connection between the two of us, because I also know that you were a political science undergrad major.
Yes.
And in international relations, I too was political science. And so we talked about the business, we talked about the social work. Let's talk about the politics. I want to know your foundation. Is there a part of your organization that focuses on policy and how you can be instrumental in creating stronger protections for children around the world? Is that a part of your portfolio of things that you have to do?
Well, I would say yes and no. So we don't directly work in policy or legislative action. Okay. But what we do is advocate and educate. So I think that you can think of it as an iron fist and a velvet glove.
Yes.
So you will never see us truly having statements but we will educate and we will discuss and we may reference policies. But we also are very client-centered in our focus. I think the benefit, as I mentioned, is that we're one of 4 offices. So we have offices in Brazil, Germany, and Sweden, in addition to the United States. And while we do work independently, we are still under the umbrella of the World Childhood Foundation. And so each of our offices, I think, show the dynamics within their countries and within their international portfolios, and it informs our work. So I'll give you an example. We have been around for over 22 years. And in the United States, we were one of the first foundations to support child advocacy centers. And child advocacy centers, for your listeners who may not be aware, are centers where a child who's disclosed abuse will meet with a forensic trainer or a psychologist, where they're asked questions about, unfortunately, the traumatic event. The beauty of the center is that it's child friendly and it's child focused, but behind the interview room is the police department, is a psychologist, a pediatrician, a district attorney, and lawyers. And that means the child tells the story once. So they don't have to go all over, again, Brooklyn girl, so everything kind of relates to me in the subways, but they don't have to go all over the city to disclose. They don't have to tell their story 5 or 6 times. They don't have to be questioned and re-questioned. And, there's some child advocacy centers that have dogs and pets, and it makes it, a very warm environment. And when a child, oftentimes we hear from our children that it was not the act. It was the act of not being believed. And it was the re-traumatization of having to tell the story 15 times, to be questioned, to feel that, maybe I didn't say the right thing there. And so we took this model that we supported. We were one of the first. And now in Germany, they never had a child advocacy center. And so they created the Barnhaus, which is German for the House of Children. And it's based on our child advocacy centers. And so we were able to share the experience of the work of our programs. And as they were building out Barnhauses, and I don't know the plural of Barnhaus in German. I don't know. So maybe someone can tell us that. But like the, multiple Barnhaus, they learned from the US. Right. And so it's these interactions. At the end of the day, we're working to end child sexual abuse and exploitation. Unfortunately, the root of these crimes, which they are crimes, are the same. The trauma that our children face is the same. And so I think that that's how we sort of, to get back to how we sort of learn from each other. We learn the policy. We come up with ideas that maybe we hadn't thought of, and that worked in your country. I bring up Brazil because of the fact that they have done a lot of videos for education on YouTube. And it really showed us, guess what? Our world is borderless online. So it really doesn't matter. There's a real child when we see child sexual abuse material, but that child could be in Texas and that video can be in Brazil. So we need to work together to figure out how to make that better.
Wow. Well, working together is a core principle of our profession as social workers, the importance of human relationships. I want to finish this off with you giving a piece of advice to our listeners based on the experiences that you've had and what you think is the most important as we all work together to protect the most vulnerable, our children.
I would say 2 words that my grandmother, Grace Beckles, raised all of us with, and it is go brave. No matter what you do, whether your voice reverberates, if you're nervous, if you don't know what you can do, go brave. I think it's important to know that we all have a role to play in keeping our children safe. And it doesn't mean that we have to be sort of Wonder Woman, but it means that we all have a role. Your role may be being a safe adult in the children in your community's lives. Be that safe space where neighborhood children feel that they can come talk to you if something's going on. Your role may be policy. It may be learning from the work of other programs. Your role can also be a donor. That's just as a nonprofit, very important for us. So we all have a role to play, but we need to go bravely, right? We need to be brave. We need to do the hard thing, not the easy thing. And people are going to say, this is something that can never be solved. Child abuse is always going to happen. Children will always be abused. It's horrible, but oh no, I don't want to talk about that. And you need to be brave. And I always kind of, I'm kind of a bit of a history buff. Just because something was done before doesn't mean it needs to continue. And so I think that if you have been blessed, like innumerably blessed, to have a childhood free of abuse and exploitation, that's a world you should create. If you have lived experience, then that is not your shame to carry. You are a survivor, and whatever that survivorship looks like. And being a survivor doesn't mean that you need to talk about it. Being a survivor means waking up every single day when it could be easy to not. That's survivor leadership as well. Just be brave. Be brave in your convictions and be brave to not be silent. My grandmother always said, you go brave and the world's going to open up to you. So it served me well for the past few decades. So I hope it continues.
Go brave.
Go brave.
Go brave. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to hold you to this. So
I'm ready to do this work with intention and to join you and other social workers as well. I don't believe that there is just one way to do social work.
Absolutely.
And I am grateful for the work that you're doing and just for sharing with all of us, because I think that everything that you are is a representation of the diversity of social work. You know, we need to be in different spaces. We don't all need to be doing the same thing the same way because the world needs us. So I am
now more than ever.
Yeah, now more than ever. And I am glad that you are a part of the School of Social Work as an alum, but always family. And so thank you so much for today. This season is all about talking with people who are on the ground making progress toward a more just future, and how every person can be involved in creating change via advocacy and organizing. Nicole exemplified this in the diversity of her experiences, both professionally and personally. From her career in volunteerism, furthering child well-being, to her personal journey as a daughter of a military man and a Trinidadian woman, and trailblazer in her own work, she has taught us all to go brave and believe in the service of your passions.